COVID cases plummet in the United States to levels that we haven't seen in a year. Exploring the lab leak theory on COVID's origins and the age-old debate over whether school dress codes are sexist. Monday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Monday, May 24th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo, soon to be dad. Good morning.
One more week or so over here. How was your weekend?
It was good, maybe too good, given that I not only forgot my pass to get in this morning, I also forgot my mask. I mean, which I think tells you that there's a feeling of some normalcy. I left my house with, normally I admit I do disposable masks because I have to wear so much freaking makeup here that it's just gross when I leave. And I forgot my mask that I leave by the door. Luckily, I had a couple extras in my backpack, but.
I feel like that's like a real metric.
Yes.
Jill forgetting her mask. That's a big deal. Wow.
Because I've seen people kind of forget their masks before, where they'll walk in somewhere and they'll be like, oh my gosh, whoops. That's never been me. I've often thought, oh, I wish I could feel that way, where this wasn't always something, COVID wasn't top of mind, always. So I think that's a good sign.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it.
Okay, well, on that note, the U.S. has not seen numbers this good since last summer. By all metrics, the pandemic's on the way out, at least here in the United States. The national daily caseload clocking in at under 30,000 for the first time since last June. Average daily deaths down to about 550. More than 61% of adults are at least partially vaccinated, and the number is still growing by 1 or 2 percentage points a week. So clearly the rate is slowing down, but still we're
still putting up numbers.
Yeah, we're slowly but surely getting there.
Just want to make a note about India. They have become the third country to cross 300,000 deaths after us and Brazil. But the worst outbreaks in India, especially in those big dense cities like Mumbai and Delhi, are starting to recede. Hospitals across the country seem to have made it through the worst of the deluge there, knock on wood. Seems like there's no longer an oxygen shortage, so that's some good news. Hopefully, India was the last big surge. We won't know for a while, right? But the test, I think, is going to be in the fall, whether it's here or overseas. And just, in the United States, are you going to see these pockets of states that are really under-vaccinated start to get new waves of cases? We don't have to worry about that yet, I guess, right? I mean, we should really, this is amazing. What's happening in this country is so good. 8 states, 70% of adults vaccinated. Rhode Island was the latest to add to that list.
One dose.
Yes, partially vaccinated, yes. 70% really the magic number, but even 60%, like we've been saying, is key, because that's really when you start to see the cases fall off. And I got to say, Jill, to your point earlier, it felt almost like a normal weekend here in New York City this past weekend. Just in terms of people being out, people being in bars and restaurants. Madison Square Garden last night for the Knicks, oh my God, it was unbelievable.
There's also some good news, because some new numbers are showing that the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is about 88% effective against one of the variants in India, the new Indian variant. AstraZeneca, a bit lower, but still quite effective. So this is all very good news, because we talk about not only what's going on in India, if they could get the vaccine rollout, it will even help more get that situation under control. But ultimately, these variants, of course, are going to make their way back here to the United States at some point. Also, we want to mention a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick enough in November of 2019 that they had to be hospitalized, according to a previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence report cited by the Journal. The 3 scientists reportedly had symptoms consistent with COVID-19 a month before the first coronavirus cases were reported in Wuhan, which is now supporting this theory that the virus may have actually escaped from that lab. China has strongly denied the lab leak theory on how the virus originated, and the World Health Organization is still investigating. Wow.
I mean, you and I have long said that there's a lot of media organizations that called this BS from the beginning. We were one of them. I mean, I don't want to give us too much credit here, but we have always said, I think, that this was a possibility. Remember, not that it was engineered in a lab. I think this is what people get confused about. The theory here is not that like China engineered COVID as like a bioweapon or something, right? It was that it was conceived in this lab that was studying coronaviruses in bats as part of some research, and then it accidentally escaped, like on somebody's shoe, right? That's the lab leak theory. So that said, this Wall Street Journal article, which is a big deal this morning, it's citing all unnamed government officials. Always be wary when you see that. Unnamed government sources, that's what got us into Iraq. That's basically any big story that ended up being false in the last 20 years. You can sort of go back, and most of them are started with newspaper articles and big papers citing unnamed officials. So I don't know. We're probably never going to know for sure. I think that's probably the really what it comes down to. But there's definitely lessons to be learned here. You think we will? I hope so.
I'm with you. So a lot of scientists who talk about it say they'll analyze the DNA of it enough that they will eventually be able to figure it out, but it could take years. The thinking is the scientific community will eventually get to the bottom of it, but
I hope so.
With no help from China, where
well, of course,
and that's the shame of it. And when you think about, there never needed to be a global pandemic. It never needed to happen.
Or just imagine if they were like, heads up, folks, like this, we got something coming. We got something going on here in this city of Wuhan in November of 2019, months before anyone else was taking it seriously. Imagine the lives that could have been saved. One other thing just on this, though. Facebook and Twitter suppressed this last year. When this theory started sort of percolating this time last year, you weren't allowed to post about it on those platforms. They were suspending accounts for posting about the lab leak theory. Now that theory has sort of been embraced by the mainstream media as at least a possibility, I think it's worth asking this question again about whether we want these tech companies making these decisions about what can and cannot be published on their platforms, whether it's Hunter Biden's laptop, whether it's the lab leak theory, whether it's anything, right?
I mean, I look at the anti-Semitism that's being spread online,
sure.
On Facebook, Instagram, certainly TikTok. I mean, and it's not taken down, and it's wild. It's certainly having a real impact. Words matter. Things you post on social media matter. It's having a real impact. People are beating up Jewish people on American soil right now.
I could tweet Hitler, the hashtag Hitler was right now, and it would be up there.
In fact,
nothing would be done.
If you did, we would no longer be doing this podcast or friends, but you would not be alone. I think it's like there have been 17,000 of those tweets with that hashtag, at least within the past, just in the past 10 days or so. So, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Like, Trump is banned, and you could say yes, rightly or wrongly, but where do you draw the line? There is tons of hate speech, and also censorship going on, and it's who makes these decisions.
Right.
It's a real question. Okay, sticking with China for a second, 2 of China's top marathoners among 21 people who were killed in extreme weather during a 62-mile mountain race. According to Chinese media reports, runners competing in this grueling ultra marathon in the Gansu province were at about the 12-mile mark when the weather turned on a dime. Temperatures plummeted, rain turned to hail, gale force winds blew in, just as the runners, who were wearing short sleeves and shorts, were caught on a dangerous mountain pass. What a tragedy.
What a crazy story. These race organizers facing questions about how they could possibly not have accounted for this severe weather. I mean, it's weather, right? Like we sort of can guess the weather now. But I don't mean to laugh. It really is a terrible tragedy. I mean, how does this happen, right? I just can't even imagine how you could just be running this race and all of a sudden just feel like you're trapped on this, on this mountain pass in your shorts, and the freezing rain comes in. I mean, you've run marathons. I guess you haven't run a marathon like this, though, right?
Right. So these are a little different. These are ultra marathons. So a regular marathon, 26.2 miles. This is about 2 to 3 times that length. Some people do 100-mile runs. It's much more intense. Not that running a marathon isn't, but I was thinking about it because when you run the New York City Marathon or any organized marathon, there are people, you've got fans lining the whole way, usually.
Yeah.
But there's every mile, medics, water stations, hydration stations. And obviously you're not going to have that in an ultra marathon type setting. But this clearly did not need to happen. And you have to wonder how nobody was watching. Like, because there could, forget the severe weather. There are there's a very real possibility of other medical emergencies when somebody is putting their body through something like that. What if there was no bad weather, but a runner just had a real medical emergency? Was there just nobody to help? I don't really understand.
Yeah, I guess in these sort of like ultra races, you're sort of on your own, right?
Another bizarre international story making headlines around the world. This morning, the government of Belarus scrambling fighter jets to intercept a civilian European airliner flying through the country's airspace, forcing it to land so that a dissident journalist on board could be seized. The Ryanair flight from Greece to Lithuania making an emergency landing in Minsk, where authorities snatched Roman Protasevich, a 26-year-old critic of the Belarus president, Alexander Lukashenko. He's the strongman leader known as Europe's last dictator. This story is wild. I was listening to some interviews with some of just the regular passengers on board, and they were like they thought they were going to die at how scary in terms of that plane just sort of like turning around and landing.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was going on.
Well, because the government scrambled fighter jets, and then they told the pilot to tell the passengers there was a bomb on board.
Yeah.
So imagine you're just flying and they tell you that, and that's why you have to land, which was obviously BS. But yeah, I mean, you thought you had a Ryanair horror story, right? Lukashenko, by the way, a Putin puppet, so this shows that I think Putin's willingness to put down dissent at all costs is spreading to his client states. And something's got to be done about that. So Ryanair, which of course, if you've flown it, it's one of the worst airlines in the world. They'd probably even admit that because it's one of these, the whole thing is that it's just rock bottom prices. You don't get anything other than a seat from point A to point B. But they put out a statement that I thought was really something, acknowledging basically just that the flight took off from Minsk and landed safely in Vilnius, which was its original destination. No mention that it was essentially a state-sponsored hijacking. Ben Jacobs on Twitter noted that would be like if Ford's Theater issued a statement that said they were able to complete their production of Our American Cousin despite the interruption in the third act. To just an incredibly lame response from Ryanair. I mean, you're going to let yourself get owned by Belarus, of all countries. But I think about a story that I covered in 2013 when Russia shot down that passenger jet carrying something like 200 Dutch people, killing them all. They said it was by accident. I don't even know if they ever actually admitted it. No one even batted an eye. That was just like, oh, okay, so Russia's just like blowing passenger flights out of the sky. Imagine if there were 200 Americans on that flight.
No, it's frightening. Meanwhile, the crypto sell-off continuing through the weekend with Bitcoin's price falling below 32,000 at one point before rebounding a bit. Bitcoin now down 50% from its peak in mid-April, still up close to 20% on the year. Ether and Doge down 60% from their all-time highs.
Bitcoin's back up actually about 7% just since we wrote that last night. So it's more of these just wild swings probably going to be the story this week. I find it's very hard to find really good journalism on what's happening in crypto. If anybody has like a really good reporter or outlet that they read for this stuff, I'd be curious to hear, because it just seems like everybody out there has an agenda and like people are so militant about it, right? It's either like a total scam or it's the future of, currency, when I'm sure it's something in between, like most things are. But the source of value of crypto, it's so ambiguous that what happens here is it's just like it's whatever the prevailing narrative is what causes these wild swings and determines the price. I don't know what else to make of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the problem. It's new. If you say you're a Bitcoin expert, when you think of an expert, you're like, oh, I've been doing this for decades. Bitcoin and all of these cryptocurrencies are, in the scheme of things, really new. And there are so many questions, regulations. Our government's going to try to really cut back on them. Which of these players is going to be the big one? In 5 years from now, are we only going to be talking Bitcoin? Are we only going to be talking Ether? So
It's so
I
speculative.
I think that there's a reason why. Plus, you could trade it 24/7. That's another thing. It doesn't operate on those normal market hours of 9:30 to 4 here in the U.S. or any of the markets overseas.
That's a good point too, because I think what happens there is if you have time off, it sort of helps you can sort of digest the news a little more, right?
Yeah, I mean sometimes that it does help. Even when earnings come out, they come out. There's a reason that they come out before or after the market is open. In sports, Phil Mickelson became the oldest golfer to win a major with his victory at the PGA Championship yesterday. Mickelson is going to be 51 in a few weeks. He claimed his sixth major and the first since 2013. Did you watch any of it, Carlo?
I watched a little. Phil Mickelson's the man. I've always loved him. This just proves that golf is the best sport to be pro in, I think. I don't even know what other sport, like maybe bowling, competing with that. I mean, you can still dominate in your 50s. Like, where else could you do that? Also, while we're on the topic of sports, a quick NBA update. The playoffs are in full swing. The second games start tonight. The Knicks broke my heart last night, but I have to say it was just watching, if you watched any of the games this weekend, watching these arenas full, either 75% full or 100% full in some cases, just full of cheering fans. After all of this time, like if that doesn't put a smile on your face, man, check your pulse. I just was, I was grinning from ear to ear watching the Knicks last night. Like imagine that. Imagine you haven't been in a crowd in 15 months. You're a Knicks fan, and the first time you get to be in a big crowd is in the Garden for the playoffs. Like that's just so cool.
And Carlo, Saturday Night Live put on its season finale featuring Anya Taylor-Joy from Queen's Gambit as host. Lil Nas X was the musical performance. It was the show's first time that they performed in front of a full capacity audience at Studio 8H. Since this pandemic started, an emotional cold open featuring the longest tenured cast members has fans guessing that some of their favorites like Kate McKinnon, Cecily Strong, Kenan Thompson, that they could be leaving forever. I mean, Kate McKinnon was basically holding back tears the entire cold open. So I think that she's out of there.
I'm surprised she stayed this long. Yeah, she's hilarious. I think that she'll leave. I think Kenan Thompson will probably leave. Although I don't know, he's been doing this show forever. But they really need some fresh blood on that show in a bad way. I mean, I know that it's like so trite to be like, oh, SNL's not funny anymore, but it just feels like they need some new, like they need a new Kate McKinnon, basically.
And finally, a Florida high school is facing criticism from parents and students after female students noticed that their yearbook photos were photoshopped to cover up their chests, even their bare arms. About 80 girls at Bartram Trail High School near Jacksonville had their photos digitally and rather crudely altered to cover exposed skin. No boys' photos were changed, though, including one showing the swim team in Speedos. The controversies opened up the debate about whether school dress codes are sexist and outdated. That's a debate? Yes, clearly they are. What do you mean, opened up the debate?
Right. What is the debate at this point? American Puritanism at its best. It's amazing, right? It's amazing that this stuff is still happening. I remember when I was in high school, they were complaining about girls wearing spaghetti straps. That was like the big thing. Like they would tell girls wearing spaghetti strap tank tops that they had to put a shirt on to come in. It's like they never complained about anything I wore. I mean, I was not that I wore anything like that revealing, but I was dressed like a complete idiot throughout high school, and it was totally fine.
So I was curious what these before and after of these pictures looked like, and so I just Googled the story.
Yeah.
The girls were not inappropriate.
No.
I mean, these girls. I don't even understand. It was sleeveless shirts. I'm wearing a sleeveless shirt right now as a news anchor.
Right.
One girl was wearing a shirt. You could see like a teeny bit of maybe the top of her breast. You can't even call it cleavage, and they covered it up.
I know.
What were they thinking? I don't even understand how this could happen in the year 2021.
I know.
And these girls didn't know, and like they just did it without asking anyone's permission.
And now these poor girls are, now that I mean, we're adding to it ourselves here, but now that it's become like a national news story, these poor girls have their pictures like plastered up all over the internet. It's just crazy. Like, let kids wear whatever they want. Who cares?
And these are high school kids, right? Especially at that age, you're so insecure anyway, or at least I was, about your body and your weird,
totally
feeling like kind of awkward anyway. Way to make it worse. parents
Yeah,
or whoever made this decision. I mean, who made? I don't even know. What was it? The school who made the decision?
It was. Yeah, I think it was like most schools. It was like there was a a teacher who was sort of like in charge of the yearbook, and it looks like she sort of took it upon herself to, yikes.
It was a woman. It was a female teacher.
It sounds like it. Let me double check on that though. I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Never let the facts get in the way of a good story, Carlo. Clearly, we are joking on that. I really let's really clarify that, because that changes the story a little bit, doesn't it?
I guess. I mean, it's even more insane, really, if it was a woman who did this.
Okay, we're gonna leave it there. That is what you need to know for Monday, May 24th. Carlo, this is your last week, right?
This is Friday will be my last day, just for a couple weeks though. So don't worry, unless I just lose my mind and no one ever sees me again. But probably not.
We'll see.
Bye, guys.